The New York Giants safeties weren't as productive last season as hoped. Will this year be different? We're going to take a look at that and more on today's Locked On Giants podcast, coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our everydayers, our newcomers, our Blue Crew community members, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if we're your first listen of the day, we thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code Locked On NFL to get $20 off your first purchase. All right, Giant fans, we are wrapping up our look at the Giants position groups. We've been doing one a day now for the last couple of weeks. Today, we're going to take a look at the safeties group. And this is probably, if I had to pick one group in particular where I have the greatest concerns, this would be it for various reasons, which I'll get into in a moment. But just to break down what we're going to cover today, we're going to take a look at last year, why the group maybe wasn't as productive as it should have been. Then we will look, of course, at the individual players, and then we'll wrap things up with some questions moving forward about the safeties group. So again, welcome on into everybody, and let's get into it because we got a lot to cover. Okay, now let's take a look last year at the deployment of the group. So I went to True Media to get some stats. I also took a look at NFL Pro to get some stats. And one of the things that, interestingly enough, was missing from the Giants safeties group is they didn't do a lot of blitzing. Now, why is that significant? Because blitzing, truth be told, was a strength of a couple of those guys, specifically Jason Pinnock, who is no longer here. And I'm going to get to Javon Holland in a moment. But interestingly enough, when Shane Bowen came in as the defensive coordinator, he didn't have Pinnock blitzing as much as Pinnock had blitzed maybe earlier in his career with the Giants. And I just thought that was kind of unusual because, you know, if you're a coach, wouldn't you want to play players to the best of their abilities? Wouldn't you want them to tap into their strengths and somehow figure out a way to work their strengths into what you're doing? And the Giants just didn't do a good job of that last year. So let's take a look at some stats. Again, this is per True Media. Jason Pinnock last year blitzed 9.2% of the snaps. He had 3 sacks, 5 quarterback pressures. All right. Could have been a little bit higher, I think. Now, the question that you have to ask is, was that because of the injuries? Did the injuries maybe affect that scheme that they were trying to run? That's certainly a valid question to ask. You know, maybe they couldn't blitz as much because of the injuries up front, or because maybe the pass rush wasn't getting home as much up front, and they wanted to just make sure they had guys in coverage to track down some of these faster receivers that maybe the cornerbacks were struggling with. Now, let's talk about Javon Holland, who was signed in the offseason to replace Pinnock, who went to the San Francisco 49ers. Holland, quite honestly, very good blitzer, all things considered. Now, he's not like Kyle Hamilton of the Ravens, but if you ask Holland to blitz, he can get it done. And he had his best season blitzing in 2021 when he played for Brian Flores' Dolphins defense at the time, which was a little bit more aggressive. All right. So in 2021, Javon Holland blitzed 51 times, which was a career high for him. He had a career high 8 pressures and 2.5 sacks, all career highs. So one of the obvious questions now, again, if you're Shane Bowen, do you deploy Javon Holland a little bit more as a blitzer? because he has shown that he has the strength of doing that and getting home with the blitz. That, of course, remains to be seen. But obviously, like I said, if you know you've got guys who can do a skill and you're not taking advantage of that skill to your advantage, then what are we doing here? It's like, come on, there's got to be a way you can figure out how to take advantage of what a guy does well. And I get it. Last year, the injuries might have affected some of what the Giants were trying to do on the back end of the defense. But, there were certainly situations where maybe they could have incorporated it a little bit more than what they did last year. Now, the other big thing with the safeties, and that was in coverage. The coverage just left a lot to be desired last year. So, you look at Tyler Nubin, who was one of the starting safeties as a rookie. Nubin at the University of Minnesota, he was a ball hawk. He had 13 career interceptions. Javon Holland, when he was in college for 2 years at Oregon, he had 9 interceptions, right? Last year, Nubin didn't post a single interception. And Holland with the Dolphins, he logged 5 career interceptions, okay? And just one of those 5 came in his last 27 games. Again, all that with Miami. So something's not adding up here, whether it's deployment, whether it's scheme, whether it's effort. I'm not sure what exactly it is without going through each guy's film and looking at individual stuff. But the Giants have got to get more from their safeties in coverage. And, I think the scheme that Shane Bowen wants to run is conducive to getting interceptions. You're not going to see them, racking up 20 plus interceptions as a whole, but it is conducive enough to set it up. The other thing that I think hurt the Giants in terms of overall coverage and interceptions was manageable yardage. All right. So all too often last year, the Giants, instead of having a defensive situation where they forced the offense into 3rd and long or 2nd and long or 4th and long, too often the opposing offense had manageable yardage situations, which meant they could either pass or they could run, and they could do a lot more than if they had to do, an obvious passing down. So some specifics for you. And this is per NFL Savant, this information. 129 times the Giants defense faced 3rd and long. And that includes, by the way, plays that were blown dead. All right. I think it came down to something like 109 when it was all said and done, plays that actually counted. But overall, 129 where the Giants defense faced a situation where the offense had 3rd and long, and 3rd and long defined as 6 or more yards needed for the first down. All right. The opposing offenses converted 33 of those 3rd and long situations, or 25.5% of those plays. So basically, they were converting at least a quarter of their 3rd and longs. You can't have that. That's not all on the safeties, mind you, but the safeties part of that. And also, we talk about interceptions and the opportunities to break up plays and all that stuff. That all factors in to what the back end of the defense can do. And the Giants just not very good at making sure that they kept opponents in long yardage situations. So when you have that problem, you're not going to be very good on defense. And that, folks, is probably why the Giants put such a great emphasis this past offseason on building up their defensive front 7, building up the pass rush, getting guys who can get in there and stuff the run, getting guys in there who can rush the passer, get the passer off his mark, get him to throw the ball before he's ready to, set up some more opportunities for takeaways on the back end of the defense. So it all goes hand in hand if you think about it. And the Giants just now, they need that production to come from the back end of the defense and specifically from their safety position. All right, now coming up next, we're going to break down each player, each main safety on the Giants, according to what they have done so far and what they could possibly do. So that's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, we've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever before. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last minute deals. Ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy? The Game Time app will show you a panoramic seat view so that there are no surprises. You won't have to worry about getting stuck behind a pillar or just have a partially obstructed view. And with Game Time, the price you see is the price you will pay. There are no hidden fees. Worried about what happens if your plans change? The Game Time guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more. So go on, take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. This week, the New York Giants, believe it or not, the rookies report to training camp. That's right. It is here, folks. So we are back to 5 days a week here on the Locked On Giants podcast. We will have shows for you every day this week. And once the veterans get in next week and they start practicing, we'll probably have shows on the weekend for you as we keep you up to date on all things Giants. Now, for the rookies reporting, the media is not in the building. We are not going to be allowed to see, what's going on with the rookies. I think pretty much that's going to be meetings and stuff anyway. So there won't be any media access, but we will continue our coverage. I've got plenty of content planned for you this week, which I hope you will check out. And then, of course, the following week, it all gets started. So we have made it through the long off season, and I'm excited to bring you the content here on Locked On Giants. All right, we are taking a look on today's show at the New York Giants safeties. So let's take a look now at the individual players. All right, let's kick things off with Javon Holland, a.k.a. the Snowman. He's nicknamed the Snowman because he has always worn number 8, which kind of looks like a snowman. All right, Javon Holland, one of the top free agent signings that the Giants made this past offseason. So let's take a look at what he does well, where he maybe needs a little, more reinforcement and so forth. All right, in the previous segment, I mentioned how the Giants weren't taking advantage of the safeties talent last year that was able to blitz. Just so happens that Holland is a pretty good blitzer. Again, not Kyle Hamilton good, but if you ask him to blitz, he can get the job done for you. So I mentioned in 2021 under Brian Flores, when Holland was with the Dolphins, he was pretty good at blitzing. He blitzed a career high 10.9% of the time, had a 25.8% quarterback pressure rating, a 4.0 sack rate, right? Those are career highs for Javon Holland. The thing that Holland does well on the blitz is he times them so well. If you watch him on tape, it's almost like he knows what the snap count is going to be, and he just times his get off. And a lot of times you see him moving forward just as that ball starts to be snapped, which gives him a head start and also gives him the momentum to get into the backfield and at least be a disruptor. So that's something that, the Giants can certainly tap into with Javon Holland. Now, also what's to like about Javon Holland, he has a quick twitchiness to him and good sideline to sideline range. So, can you honestly say that Holland's an upgrade over Jason Pinnock? I think we can. It all depends, though, again, how Shane Bowen is intending to use Javon Holland. And hopefully, like I said, they use him to do some blitzing because it is a strength of him. Now, also worth noting is that Javon Holland can close down quickly on ball carriers and receivers. And that's what you want to see when you are running a zone-heavy coverage scheme. All right. So Javon Holland is not going to be caught flat-footed. You're going to see him in the vicinity of the intended receiver, and chances are he's going to come up with the play for you. So you shouldn't have a whole lot of yards after the catch on targets that are thrown against him. You shouldn't have much in terms of, touchdowns and stuff like that. The only thing that's really been missing from his game, like I said, has been the pass breakups and the interceptions. And again, with the front seven having been upgraded, the hope is that now the back end of the defense will have more of an opportunity to make some of those plays and flip the field. Okay, Tyler Nubin, let's take a look at him. Tyler Nubin, as we all know, I think he only played in 12 games because he had the ankle injury that ended his season early. But one of the strengths we saw from Tyler Nubin was his run defense. It was pretty good, ladies and gentlemen. All right. He was tied for third on the Giants last year with 30 run defense tackles. And to give you an idea, the leaderboard atop of the list had 33. So Nubin, and the leader was Micah McFadden, by the way, in run tackles. So McFadden played a few more games than Tyler Nubin did last year, and Nubin only missed out by like 3 run defense tackles. So that should kind of tell you a little something about Tyler Nubin as a run defender. Tyler Nubin, at one point, just before that injury ended his season, he had 3 straight games with 12 tackles. All right. Pretty good. That's what you want to see. And those games, by the way, fell between weeks 10 and 13. Remember, they had the bye week in that grouping too. But so Nubin was kind of starting to feel his own or come into his own at that point. So imagine what he could do against a run in a full season. He could potentially be the Giants tackle leader next year if he could play a full season. And he's also going to be key in the run defense. All right. I don't think he got enough credit for his play against the run last year. Something that really needs to be acknowledged, I think. Now, also keeping in line with the run defense, Tyler Nubin was a good tackler. He had 10 missed tackles last year, which was the lowest number of any Giant defender who had at least 50 tackles. All right. So Nubin's not going to miss tackles. He's physical. He's going to hit. He's a hard hitter. Everything you can want when it comes to run defense. Now, where did he fall short? The answer is coverage, as I mentioned before. Now, while Tyler Nubin did not allow a touchdown at all last year, he had no interceptions, and he only had 1 pass breakup. So again, the question begs to be asked, was it the scheme that didn't help him out? Or what was it? I happen to think part of it was the scheme, because as the injuries started piling up, especially up front, in the front 7, there were tweaks made to the scheme that might have affected how the Giants were, producing on the back end of the defense. And of course, we can point to the pass rush and the lack of it, the lack of pressures, the lack of disruptions. All that played a factor into why the Giants' defensive backfield, just as a whole, wasn't very productive in terms of pass breakups, in terms of interceptions. This year, the hope is that all that will be better. And it should if everybody is healthy. All right, let's now look at Dane Belton. Now, Dane Belton's kind of an interesting player in that I go back to last spring, not this past spring, but the spring before, and everybody was just waxing on enthusiastically about Dane Belton, how good he looked, how, he was the best, basically, safety that they had. And then what happened? We get to summer, we get to the regular season, and Belton, instead of being a starter or challenging for a starting job, falls off the landscape, so to speak. Part of that is Belton, with his play style, he's prone to injury. Okay, so that was part of the problem. But Belton in coverage also had his share of hiccups. So let's get into some data for him. Belton was the only one of the Giants safeties last year, believe it or not, to have a dropped interception. All right. So that's going to not go over very well with the coaches. He finished with 5 pass breakups. He did record an interception. He allowed 3 touchdowns for a 116.1 NFL coverage rating. Those numbers were the worst amongst the safeties last year. All right. So coverage, a problem for Dane Belton as well. Belton particularly struggled against the tight end in coverage. Now, per True Media, Belton allowed opposing tight ends on 11 pass targets to opposing tight ends. Belton gave up 8 receptions. Now, just so happened that his lone interception came against a tight end, or on a target, I should say, to a tight end. But still, 8 of 11, which, you think of a safety in coverage, you'd like to think that maybe they can cover the tight end a little bit better, and Belton just couldn't, deliver on that. Missed tackles. Belton had 5 missed tackles on 460, defensive snaps for a 9.3% rate. So his game last year can best be summed up kind of as a mixed bag with a few more negatives than positives. And, look, when Belton was asked to step in for Nubin, when Nubin went down with the season-ending ankle injury, Belton wasn't horrible. They could get by with him, but as a starter, he hasn't been able to take that leap. And now that he is in a contract year this year, can he take that leap to show that maybe he can be deployed a little bit more often in different packages and be a little bit more productive? Well, that's a question that we're going to get the answer to this summer and into the preseason and into the regular season. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, we're going to take a look at the final questions we have regarding the Giants safety group. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. We are taking a look at the Giants safety group. It's the last group that we are going to preview before the start of training camp. The rookies, again, report this week, the veterans next week, and we will get fully into breaking down everything that goes on in training camp once we get the veterans in here. So it's going to be exciting. I'm really excited about the upcoming training camp and this roster. Hopefully, we see a lot of good competition unfold. Now, getting back to the safeties here and the questions that I have about the group, besides those that I've already outlined about, can they be more productive? The biggest question I have, and perhaps the one reason why I am most concerned about the safety group, is the depth they have at the position. So their starters are Tyler Nubin and Javon Holland. Dane Belton would be a backup. And then who else? Anthony Johnson was recovering from a shoulder injury, but I think he was more of a special teamer. They have an intriguing rookie by the name of Makari Page on the rosters, trying to make the roster. What does he bring to the table? We'll find out. But really, to me, the safety position, if they have an injury to either Nubin or Holland, I don't think that would be a very good thing. I'll be honest with you. That is the one position that just, the depth is such a question mark for me, at any rate, in my opinion. So I'm not saying the Giants need to carry 5 safeties. I'm sure they'll carry 4 and maybe put 1 on the practice squad. But if you were to ask me to make that projection right now, I think I would have trouble saying, well, I feel good about projecting this, this, and this. Makari Page does intrigue me. I think he might have the best chance out of those who are competing for that last spot, if there is a last spot to be had. But overall, just the depth is a problem. Now, might they deploy a linebacker as a pseudo safety? They could. Is there a cornerback on the roster who could move into that safety spot if they want to run with quote unquote 3 safeties? Possibly. Do they have enough for a big nickel package? Again, it depends on what they do with linebacker. Do they move a linebacker into that role? So A lot of questions, I think, regarding the safety spot. And, you could say that, all right, they could get creative with the personnel deployment and how they use different guys. And maybe that covers up, any concerns that might exist about the depth. But again, I go back to the injury issue. If Nubin or Holland get hurt, now you put Belton in there. And then who's behind Belton? So that to me would be probably the biggest concern with the Giants' safety. In addition to can they be more productive, which I think they can given the front seven and the improvements they've made. But the depth is probably my number one and my only, if you will, concern with this team and with this team's safeties. So we're going to see how it all plays out. Going to be a lot of competition at that spot. And we'll see, like I said, Ken McCorry Page, who right now I would say is my sleeper pick to really, make some waves. That's based on the spring. Obviously, we've got to get into the summer when the pads go on, when the preseason games are played. But right now, I would say Macari Page is probably one of my sleepers to make some noise and have a chance of maybe grabbing a spot there at safety. All right, Giant fans, on that note, that is going to do it for this edition of the Locked on Giants podcast. Now, before we say goodbye, I have an announcement to make. The Locked on NFL Top 100 will be released this Wednesday, July 16th, 10 a.m. Eastern on Locked on Sports Today. The NFL Top 100 was voted on by the NFL hosts of Locked On. And spoiler alert, there are some stunners on the list. So don't miss the program. Find out where your favorite players were ranked. Subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And then be sure to check out Locked On Giants throughout the week, as I'll have some reactions as to where the Giant players place. Did they place high enough? Did they place too low? Was it just right? I'm going to break some of that down for you coming up this week on the Locked on Giants podcast. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for me. I will see you tomorrow. Have a great one.